I never thought I'd be the kind of person to crack. But here I am, standing in front of the mirror, watching myself break in real time. It wasn't a single moment that shattered everything. It was 1,000 little things, all adding up, slipping through the cracks until I couldn't ignore them anymore. The truth had been hiding in plain sight, but I was too blind to see it. And when I finally did, I couldn't unsee it. I remember the day it all started to shift, though I didn't know it then. I had just come back from a business trip, exhausted and ready to collapse on the couch. My wife, Tara, had been distant in the weeks leading up to it. Nothing overtly alarming, but enough for me to feel the tension hanging in the air like a thick fog that wouldn't lift. She greeted me at the door, just like she always did, smiling, her usual bright eyes sparkling with a warmth I had come to expect. But there was something off about the way she held herself, something that felt too practiced. Too fake. "Welcome home," she said, her voice light, but I could hear the strain in it if I listened closely. "Thanks," I mumbled, my bags heavy in my hands. "You good?" "Yeah, fine," she replied, her smile never faltering. But I noticed the way her gaze flickered quickly to her phone, which was lying on the counter. She had been scrolling through it the entire time I was unpacking. Normally, I wouldn't have thought anything of it. People get caught up in their phones all the time, right? But for some reason, that night, it bothered me more than it should have. It was as if she was trying too hard to act like everything was normal, like she was pretending. We sat down for dinner, the two of us. Tara usually asked me about my trip, wanting to know the details, the food, the people, the work. But tonight, she was silent. Her fork moved mechanically through her plate, but her mind was elsewhere, and I could tell. "What's wrong?" I finally asked, setting my fork down. She looked up at me, blinking, as if she had been lost in thought. "Nothing," she said quickly, as if I hadn't noticed the distance between us. The silence that followed was the loudest thing in the room. It was in the way she avoided looking at me, the way she chewed her food without really tasting it. It was the way her smile didn't reach her eyes, like she was putting on a mask. I wanted to say something more, to press her about it, but I didn't. Maybe I was afraid of what I might hear, or maybe I just wasn't ready to face the truth. Later that night, after we'd both gotten ready for bed, I couldn't sleep. The weight of the silence between us kept me awake, turning over and over in my mind. I watched her lying next to me, her back turned, her breathing slow and steady. She looked like she was asleep, but I knew better. She was just pretending, just like she had been all evening. I turned on my side, facing the ceiling, unable to stop the thoughts from swirling. I was trying to make sense of the last few weeks, the small changes, the little things I had brushed off as nothing. Her late nights, her distracted looks, the way she seemed to be constantly texting someone when I wasn't looking. I reached for my phone and checked the messages. She had been up late texting, more than usual. The conversation seemed to end abruptly, with a single good night, sent hours before I got home. I wasn't the kind of person to go through her phone, but something inside me snapped, and I couldn't help myself. I unlocked it, scrolling through her messages. Nothing stood out at first, just some exchanges with friends, some casual work-related chats. But then, there it was. A message from a number I didn't recognize, something that made my stomach turn. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow." It was a simple message, one that might have meant nothing. But the timing, the fact that she'd been so secretive about it. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something huge, something right in front of me. My heart raced as I closed the phone and placed it on the nightstand. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, but I knew better. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The next morning, she was already gone by the time I woke up. "Another early meeting," she said, but I knew that wasn't it. Tara always made sure to say goodbye, to kiss me good morning, but today, there was none of that. I spent the whole day with that nagging feeling in the back of my mind. That sick feeling that wouldn't go away. I was trying to focus on work, to keep busy, but I couldn't. I kept thinking about the message, about the look on her face last night when I asked if anything was wrong. I waited until she got home, pacing around the living room like a caged animal. I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was slipping away from me, piece by piece. I had to know. I needed to know. When she finally walked in, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor, I was already standing in front of her, waiting. "Where were you?" I asked, my voice trembling just slightly. "Who were you texting last night?" She froze. For a moment, her face showed the faintest flicker of something. Guilt, maybe, or surprise. I couldn't tell. But she quickly recovered, plastering that same fake smile on her face. "It's nothing," she said, her voice casual, but the look in her eyes was anything but. I didn't believe her. Not anymore. The rest of that evening felt like walking through thick fog. Tara's calm exterior was almost unsettling. She was being so normal, so casual, it made my gut twist. The lie she had told me lingered in the air, hanging between us like a threat. But she smiled, laughed at something on TV, and kissed me goodnight like everything was fine. I didn't sleep. I spent the night thinking about that message, about the way she'd acted, about the creeping suspicion that something was happening behind my back that I had no control over. Tara had always been secretive to some degree, more so than I ever liked. She had a way of hiding her thoughts, of locking parts of herself away. But this was different. This wasn't just privacy. This was a wall that was being built between us, brick by brick, and I was helpless to stop it. The next day, I decided to do something I never thought I'd do. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being lied to, and I wasn't going to wait around and hope that things would get better. I needed answers, and I needed them now. I was no detective. I had never snooped, never even considered going through Tara's things. But something inside me snapped. I had to know what was happening. So, when she left for work that morning, I found myself standing in our living room, staring at her phone on the counter. I told myself I wasn't going to look, that I didn't want to invade her privacy. But I also knew that the truth was buried somewhere in that phone, and I wasn't going to feel at peace until I found it. My hands shook as I unlocked it. It was easy to get in. She had never been overly cautious with her phone, and I had always been able to open it with the same password she used for everything else. The screen lit up, and I immediately went straight to her messages. I scrolled through, my heart beating louder with every second. There was nothing alarming at first, just texts between her and her friends, random group chats, plans for dinner with her sister. But as I scrolled down further, I found something that made my breath catch in my throat. A message from the same unknown number I had seen the night before. "You looked beautiful last night. I can't stop thinking about you." The blood drained from my face. My fingers hovered over the screen, unsure of what I was reading. I had to read it again. And again. The same words, over and over. This wasn't some innocent exchange. It was an intimate message. A message meant for someone else. A message that shouldn't have existed in her phone. I wanted to throw the phone across the room, to scream and shout and demand answers. But instead, I sat down on the couch, numb. The silence in the apartment felt suffocating, as though I was drowning in the weight of what I was seeing. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening, trying to convince myself I was wrong. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe there was a reasonable explanation. But deep down, I knew there wasn't. I knew that what I had seen was exactly what I thought it was. Proof that something was going on between Tara and someone else. Someone who was making her feel something that I hadn't in months, maybe longer. I tried to convince myself I could handle this. That I would confront her when she came home. That I wouldn't let her lie to my face again. But when the time came, I found myself frozen. My hands were clammy, my throat dry. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, and if I took one more step, I would fall. Tara came home later that afternoon, as usual, chatting about her day like nothing had changed. I stood in the kitchen, my stomach a twisted knot. My mind was racing with questions, but I couldn't bring myself to ask them. "Hey," she said, glancing over at me. "How was your day?" I could hear the false cheer in her voice, and for a split second, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered what I had found, what she had done, and any sympathy I had for her vanished. "Tara," I said, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. "Who's texting you?" She raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by my sudden question. "What do you mean?" I said, swallowing hard. "Who is this person sending you those messages?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen. Her face turned white as she looked at the message. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. "Who is he?" I pressed, unable to keep the tremor out of my voice. "Who is he, Tara?" For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Her eyes flickered toward the floor, and I could see the weight of her guilt crashing down on her. It was all there, written on her face, the truth, the fear, the realization that her secrets were exposed. But she didn't say a word. I could feel my hands shaking. My chest felt tight, suffocating. The woman I had spent years building a life with, the woman I had trusted more than anyone, she had been lying to me. And not just lying, but doing something far worse. She had let someone else into our life, into our marriage, in ways I never could have imagined. I waited for her to speak, but the words never came. Instead, she took a step back, her eyes not meeting mine. "I don't know what you want me to say," she said, her voice trembling. I stared at her, trying to process what I was hearing. She didn't know what I wanted her to say. Of course, I knew what I wanted her to say. I wanted her to say it wasn't true, that she hadn't been unfaithful. But the silence stretched between us, more deafening than any explanation could ever be. "I want the truth," I said, my voice finally breaking. And that was when she spoke the words I had been dreading, the words that shattered whatever was left of the foundation I had once thought we were standing on. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "It's over." The words hung in the air, suffocating, suffused with finality. It's over. I couldn't process them. I couldn't even make sense of them. Tara's voice, the way it trembled as she spoke, seemed so distant, so foreign, like it wasn't even her anymore. I had spent the last few years thinking I knew her inside and out, her hopes, her fears, her flaws. But now, standing before me, was someone else entirely. Someone I didn't recognize. I felt my heart sinking into my stomach. A coldness washed over me, the kind of coldness that makes it feel like the air has been sucked out of the room. My knees buckled slightly, and I had to grip the counter to keep myself from falling. What do you mean, it's over?" The words came out more like a plea than a question. I needed her to explain, to take it back, to tell me that she was joking, that there was some mistake. But deep down, I knew there wasn't. She didn't look at me, keeping her gaze firmly planted on the floor. Her shoulders were slumped, like the weight of the world had settled onto them. "I've been seeing someone else," she admitted softly, her voice barely above a whisper. I felt my chest constrict, like all the air in the room had just been sucked away. The words she spoke were so simple, yet they hit me like a freight train. I didn't know what to feel: shock, anger, disbelief. It was all a blur. For a moment, there was nothing but silence between us. I couldn't even bring myself to speak. My mind was racing, 100 thoughts colliding at once. How could she? After everything we'd been through, how could she do this to me? My heart felt like it was being crushed under the weight of her betrayal. I had always trusted her. I had always thought we were strong, that nothing could tear us apart. But now, I stood here, completely shattered, struggling to hold onto the pieces of my world. Finally, I managed to find my voice. "Who is he?" The words came out harsher than I meant them to, and I immediately regretted the tone. But I couldn't stop myself. I needed to know. She hesitated for a moment, looking like she was struggling with the decision to tell me, but eventually, she spoke. "His name is Luke," she said quietly. "I met him at work. It just happened." She trailed off, as if her explanation was somehow enough. But it wasn't. Nothing could be enough. I felt a wave of nausea roll over me as I processed her words. Luke. I didn't know who this person was, but it didn't matter. The fact that there was someone else, someone who had taken my place, someone who had made her feel something I couldn't, was all that mattered. It was like the world around me was shifting, tilting on its axis, and I couldn't find my footing. "You've been seeing him behind my back for how long?" I could feel my hands trembling, but I didn't care. I needed to know. She looked at me then, her eyes filled with guilt, but there was something else there too, something I hadn't seen before. It was almost as if she was relieved. Relieved that I had finally found out. Relieved that she didn't have to keep pretending anymore. "About 6 months," she whispered. The words hit me like a slap in the face. 6 months. That was half a year. Half a year of lies, of deceit, of betrayal. And I had never suspected a thing. I felt my chest tighten. The air around me felt thick, suffocating. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something, to break something. But I was paralyzed, my mind spinning in circles, unable to process the sheer weight of her confession. I had been living in a lie for 6 months, and I hadn't even known it. I took a step back, trying to put some distance between us. I needed space to think, to breathe. "How could you do this to me?" I whispered, the hurt so raw it felt like a physical wound. After everything we built together." Tara's face softened, and she took a tentative step toward me, but I held my hand up, stopping her. I couldn't be near her right now. I couldn't even look at her without feeling a surge of anger and heartbreak. "I don't want your apology," I said, my voice thick with emotion. I need to understand how this happened. How did you go from being the woman I thought I knew to this stranger standing in front of me. She opened her mouth, but the words didn't come. She seemed to be searching for something, anything to say, but she couldn't find it. For the first time in our entire relationship, I saw her as weak, vulnerable, lost. The woman I had admired for so long, the woman I had trusted with everything, she was no longer the same person. She was someone else, someone who had made choices I could never understand. I don't know, she said finally, her voice barely audible. I don't know why I did it. I wasn't happy, and I didn't know how to fix it. She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask her how she could destroy everything we had over a simple feeling of unhappiness. But I didn't. Instead, I stood there, frozen, as the reality of it all sank in. Tara was no longer my wife. The woman I had loved, the woman I had shared my life with, she was gone, replaced by someone who was capable of betraying me in the most unimaginable way. Are you still in love with him? I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. I regretted it immediately, but I needed to know. She hesitated. The pause felt like an eternity. Finally, she spoke, her voice small. I don't know, she admitted. I'm so sorry. I couldn't listen to any more. I couldn't stand there and hear her try to explain something that couldn't be explained. My world had been torn apart, and nothing she said could fix it. I turned away from her, walking out of the room without saying another word. I needed space. I needed to be alone. The house felt like a prison, the walls closing in on me, and all I could hear was the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. I walked into the living room and collapsed onto the couch, staring blankly at the wall. My mind was racing, but I couldn't find any answers. How had I missed this? How had I been so blind? My mind replayed the last few months, the little signs, the moments that I had brushed off, not realizing they were the cracks in our foundation. I had been living in a lie. The next few days were a blur. I don't remember much of what happened, to be honest. It's like my brain shut down, unable to process the gravity of the situation. Tara and I barely spoke after that night. Every time I looked at her, I saw the stranger she had become. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I had given my life to, was no longer standing in front of me. Instead, there was this hollow, apologetic version of her, offering half-hearted explanations, but nothing could undo what had been done. I went to work, but I couldn't focus. I barely got through meetings. My thoughts kept spiraling back to her, to what she had done. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the betrayal replaying in my mind like a broken record, over and over again. 6 months of lies. 6 months of her slipping away from me, and I hadn't even noticed. How could I have been so oblivious? Had I really been that blind to her? Was I so consumed with my own routine, my own life, that I failed to see her slipping through my fingers? The house felt different. It felt colder, emptier, even when she was there. We ate in silence. The air was thick with unspoken words, with things left unsaid. Tara would try to talk about trivial things, but I couldn't hear her. Everything she said sounded like a distant echo, like someone else's voice. I couldn't bring myself to look at her the way I used to. The trust we had built together, the connection we shared, it had all been shattered in one instant. It wasn't just the affair, it was the lies, the secrecy, the fact that she had kept this part of her life hidden from me for so long. The person I thought I knew had been living a double life, and that was the hardest part to accept. It wasn't just the betrayal that stung. It was the fact that she had been hiding her feelings from me for so long. We had built this life together, and somewhere along the way, she had stopped being honest with me. She had stopped confiding in me, stopped sharing her hopes and fears. Instead, she had turned to someone else. Someone who had filled the void she felt inside. It wasn't just the physical act of infidelity that hurt. It was the emotional abandonment. The fact that she had sought comfort in someone else, rather than coming to me. One night, after another awkward dinner where we barely exchanged a word, I couldn't take it anymore. I was tired of living in this limbo, tired of pretending that everything was fine when it was falling apart. I needed answers, and I needed them now. I can't do this anymore, Tara, I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and sadness. I can't keep living in this house like we're strangers. We need to talk. Really talk. She looked at me, her face pale, her eyes avoiding mine. She knew what was coming. She could feel it too. The finality that hung in the air, the certainty that we were reaching the breaking point. She opened her mouth to speak, But I cut her off. No more excuses. No more lies. I want to know everything. I want to know why. Why did you do this to us? Why didn't you come to me? Why did you let it get this far? Her eyes welled up with tears, but I wasn't moved by them anymore. The tears, the apologies, they didn't matter. They couldn't fix this. I had heard them all before, and they were meaningless now. What I needed was the truth. What I needed was for her to tell me the reasons behind everything. She wiped her eyes, took a deep breath, and finally spoke. I don't know. I didn't know how to fix things. I thought if I just kept going, kept pretending everything was okay, it would get better. But it didn't, and I don't know how to fix it now. I stood there, staring at her. Her words didn't make sense. They didn't make sense because, deep down, I knew the truth. This wasn't about fixing anything. This was about her running away from something she didn't want to face. She hadn't tried to fix anything. She had chosen to escape. She had chosen someone else. And Luke? Was he your solution? Was he the one who made you feel better about everything? I asked, my voice quieter now, but still tinged with anger. You never even thought to talk to me first. You never thought to come to me when things weren't working. Instead, you chose to destroy everything. Her face crumpled as the tears started to fall again. She opened her mouth, but no words came out at first. I wasn't sure if she was truly sorry or if she was just trying to make herself feel better. At this point, it didn't matter. Her tears couldn't undo the damage. The trust was gone. The love we had built together was crumbling, piece by piece, and there was no way to rebuild it now. I never meant for it to go this far, she whispered, her voice breaking. I was confused. I didn't know what to do. I thought I could handle it, but I couldn't. And now it's too late. Too late. I repeated, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. It's been too late for a long time, Tara. This was never about what you thought you could handle. This was about you choosing to lie to me, to choose someone else over me. Don't you get it? You made your choice. For a moment, there was silence between us. The weight of her words, her confession, hung in the air like a dense fog. I felt like I was suffocating. The woman I had loved for so long, the woman I had trusted with my life, had made a choice to betray me. And now, I was left here, trying to pick up the pieces of a life that no longer made sense. I'm sorry, she said again, her voice small and pleading. I never wanted to hurt you. I never meant for it to be this way. But I couldn't hear her anymore. The apology, the guilt, it was all meaningless now. It didn't change the fact that everything was ruined. I think it's time for us to go our separate ways, I said, my voice steady, but my heart heavy with the decision. We can't fix this, Tara. We're beyond fixing. The words felt like a final blow, like the last nail in the coffin. But I knew they were true. We were beyond fixing. As I turned away from her, I realized that the man I had been, the person I thought I knew, was gone. I had been living in a fantasy, and now it was over. The days after I made the decision to end things with Tara felt like an endless void, a haunting silence that followed me wherever I went. I was no longer living in a home, but in a shell of what had once been my life. The place where I had once found comfort, warmth, and love now felt like a battlefield, empty, cold, and distant. The apartment was eerily quiet. It was as if the world had been muted, leaving nothing but the echo of my thoughts bouncing off the walls. Tara moved out within a week. She didn't fight me on it, didn't try to convince me to reconsider. I didn't know if that meant she had already given up or if she was just too broken to argue. Maybe, in some twisted way, we both knew it was over. There was nothing left to salvage. I couldn't look at her without seeing the betrayal in her eyes, and she couldn't look at me without feeling the weight of what she had done. The night she left was the hardest. I was sitting on the couch, staring at the empty room where our shared memories had once lived. Tara packed up her things quietly, not wanting to stir anything up, but the silence between us was deafening. Every movement she made was like a dagger to my heart. I tried to stay calm, but inside, I was falling apart. Are you sure you don't want to talk about this? She asked, her voice barely audible as she held a box of clothes in her hands. I shook my head. I don't think there's anything left to say, Tara. She nodded slowly, her eyes filling with tears, but she didn't try to stop them. She wiped her cheek, as though it was just another thing she had to endure. There was no longer any anger in her eyes, just a resignation that broke my heart all over again. Tara didn't speak for a few moments, simply standing there in the doorway. Then, with a final glance, she said the words I never expected to hear. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. I didn't respond. I couldn't. The words she had said to me over the last few weeks had already been burned into my mind, and no apology, no matter how sincere, could take away the pain. She left without another word, and I stood there, feeling the void grow larger. The apartment felt emptier than it had ever been. There were no longer any sounds of her laughter, no more casual conversations in the kitchen, no more shared moments on the couch after a long day. It was as though the life we had built together had evaporated, leaving nothing but the remnants of a broken dream. I had hoped that once she was gone, the pain would lessen, that somehow time would heal the wound. But that was a lie. The pain only deepened. I spent the next few days in a haze. I went through the motions, going to work, eating, sleeping, but none of it mattered. My mind kept returning to that moment when she had confessed everything to me. To Luke. I couldn't stop thinking about him. Who was he? What had he given her that I couldn't? I thought about the way she had looked at me when she admitted the affair, her eyes filled with guilt, but also something else. Something I couldn't place at the time. It was like she was free of the weight of our marriage, like she had found a way out. I found myself obsessing over it. I searched for every possible detail I could uncover about Luke. Who was he? What did he do? How did she meet him? But there was nothing substantial. No social media traces. No public record. Just the unsettling thought that Tara had hidden this from me so well, for so long. Then came the first moment I thought I might break. I was scrolling through her old texts, the ones I had read in the early days after everything had come out. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I was hoping to find something that would make sense of it all. But what I found instead was a message that shattered me more than anything else. It was from the first few weeks of the affair. A message I hadn't noticed before. Tara had texted Luke. I feel like I'm living a double life. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. I love him, but I'm not in love with him anymore. The words cut through me like a blade. It wasn't just the betrayal. It wasn't just that she had fallen out of love with me. It was that she had been hiding this deep within her for months, and I never saw it. I never felt it. I was living in a lie, and the worst part was that I had no idea. I slammed the phone down on the table, breathing heavily, my pulse racing. I couldn't breathe. The walls were closing in on me again, and I wanted to scream. I wanted to let it all out, but I couldn't. I was alone in that empty apartment, a prisoner of my own thoughts. Days turned into weeks. Tara moved on, or at least that's what I told myself. I didn't hear from her. There were no apologies, no attempts at reconciliation. I had expected that, of course. But the silence felt like a cruel reminder of everything I had lost. There was nothing left of our life together. And then, one night, as I sat alone in the dark, I received a message. It was from an unknown number, one that I didn't recognize. I almost didn't open it, but something inside me urged me to. Can we talk? The message read. It was short, but my hands were trembling as I stared at the screen. I had no idea who it was, but something told me this wasn't the end. This wasn't the last twist of the knife. And deep down, I knew it wasn't. I stared at the message for a long time, the words staring back at me like a challenge. Can we talk? It was so simple, but it felt like the universe had just thrown a bomb into the calm that I had tried to carve out in the aftermath of everything. For weeks, I had been drowning in the silence, trying to put together the broken pieces of my life, trying to pretend like I was okay. But now, this message had appeared out of nowhere, a reminder that there was still more I hadn't discovered. A reminder that the story wasn't over. I didn't recognize the number, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't a coincidence. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of it. Was it Tara reaching out? Did she want to apologize again? Or was it someone else? Maybe Luke, the man who had been the cause of all this chaos. The man who had unknowingly become the center of my world, even though I had never met him? I fought the urge to respond immediately. After everything that had happened, after all the hurt and betrayal, I was in no position to play anyone's game. But something inside me knew that I couldn't ignore this. I needed to know who was on the other side of that screen. I needed to understand why they had reached out to me now, after all this time. With trembling hands, I typed out a response. Who is this? I stared at the message, waiting for a reply. The seconds stretched into minutes, and I could feel the weight of the decision settling over me. If I opened this door, there was no turning back. Whatever this person had to say would change everything again, and I wasn't sure I was ready for it. But deep down, I knew I couldn't stop now. I couldn't leave any stone unturned. Not when I had already lost so much. My phone buzzed, interrupting my thoughts. The reply came faster than I had expected. It's Luke. I sat there, reading the message over and over again. Luke. The name felt foreign in my mouth, like a bitter taste I couldn't wash away. I couldn't decide if I was angry, confused, or just numb. A part of me wanted to throw my phone across the room, to block him and never think about this again. But another part of me, the part that had been living in the shadows of this betrayal for so long, wanted to know more. I needed to know what had happened from his side, what had driven Tara to do what she did. I typed back, my fingers hesitant. What do you want? The reply came quickly, but it wasn't what I expected. I'm not here to cause more pain. I don't want to hurt you. But there's something you need to know. About Tara. About everything. I felt my pulse quicken. I had so many questions, so many things I needed to ask. Was he just another part of her story? Or was there more to this that I had yet to uncover? I could feel the dark cloud of uncertainty looming over me again, and I couldn't escape it. I had been living in this fog for so long, and now it seemed like there was finally a chance for some kind of clarity, even if it came at a cost. Then tell me, I replied. What's the truth? The silence stretched out again as I waited for his response. I didn't know what I was expecting, but I didn't expect the words that came next. You're not the first person she's done this to. My heart stopped. The words felt like a slap in the face, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. I had to read the message again, to make sure I hadn't misunderstood. You're not the first person she's done this to. I didn't know how to react. This wasn't just about me anymore. It wasn't just about the pain she had caused me. There was something darker here, something that went beyond my own heartbreak. What was he trying to tell me? How had she hurt someone else before me? I didn't want to believe it, but the feeling in my gut told me that he wasn't lying. How many? I typed back, my fingers moving without thought, the need for answers outweighing any sense of caution. One other person. But there's more. She's not who you think she is. I sat back in my chair, the room suddenly feeling colder. I had thought I knew Tara. I had thought I understood who she was, what made her tick, what she needed. But now everything was being called into question. Who was she really? What had I missed? I couldn't bring myself to respond immediately. My mind was spinning. I thought about all the times I had defended her, all the times I had made excuses for her behavior. But now, with the weight of these new revelations pressing down on me, I realized that I had been blind. Tara wasn't just a victim of circumstances, wasn't just someone who had slipped once. She had done this before. She had hurt someone else. And that thought, knowing that the person I had loved had a history of this kind of betrayal, was enough to bring me to my knees. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. I had been holding on to the hope that there was some kind of explanation for everything, that maybe I could forgive her, that we could move past this. But now it felt like all of that was a lie. There was no forgiveness here. Not anymore. Luke messaged me again, and this time, his words were more urgent, more desperate. You need to talk to her. You need to know what she's done. His words hung in the air like a warning, and I knew, deep down, that I had no choice. I couldn't live in this half-light anymore, haunted by the things I didn't know. I needed answers. I needed closure. I wasn't sure if I was ready for what I was about to hear, but there was no turning back now. I stood up, grabbed my coat, and without another word, I left the apartment. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. The cold wind hit me like a wall as I stepped outside. The city around me was alive, people bustling about, lost in their own worlds. But for me, everything felt muted. My thoughts were consumed by the messages from Luke, and now, the weight of everything was pressing on me like a crushing force. My fingers shook as I dialed Tara's number, but as soon as the call went through, I regretted it. I wasn't sure what I expected from her, but I wasn't prepared for the conversation that followed. It rang for what felt like an eternity before she picked up, her voice sounding tired, distant, and almost mechanical. Hello, Tara, I said, my voice steady but filled with the tension of the moment. We need to talk. Now. There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear her breath hitch, the realization settling in. She knew what was coming. She knew I had discovered something more, something I couldn't ignore. About what? She asked, her voice small. About everything, I replied. Luke, and what you've been hiding. I could hear her suck in a breath, her hesitation palpable. I don't want to do this, she said, her words fragile, like she was already breaking. But it was too late for that. The walls had already come down, and now the truth had nowhere to hide. You need to tell me everything, Tara. I pressed, the urgency in my voice unmistakable. I know about him. I know what you've been doing. But Luke said something about you not being who I think you are. What does that mean? There was silence on the other end of the line, and for a moment, I thought she might hang up. But then, almost in a whisper, she said, I wasn't supposed to let it go this far. Her words were barely audible, and yet they hit me like a freight train. I could barely breathe as I processed what she had said. What did that mean? What had she done that she wasn't supposed to? You need to explain yourself, I said, my voice low but filled with anger and confusion. What aren't you telling me? She sighed, a sound that felt too heavy for someone so small, and finally, she spoke. I wasn't just with Luke. There was someone else before him. A long time ago. Someone I met when we were still together, and I never told you about him because I didn't want you to know. I didn't want to hurt you. I felt my world spin. I had already been drowning in betrayal, but this was something I hadn't seen coming. Another person? Someone before Luke? My mind raced, trying to make sense of it all, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that everything I thought I knew about Tara was a lie. Why didn't you tell me this? I asked, the pain in my voice impossible to hide now. Why didn't you just come clean? Because I was scared, she admitted, her voice trembling. Scared of losing you. I thought if I just kept everything hidden, it wouldn't matter. But it's all catching up to me now. I never meant to hurt you, but I've hurt you more than I can ever fix. Her words, as much as they cut me, were still wrapped in the same regret and helplessness that had marked every other apology she had given. It was as if she had been repeating the same lines over and over again, hoping that they would finally make everything okay. But they never did. I was silent for a long time, processing everything she had just said. How long has this been going on? I asked, barely able to get the words out. It started a year ago, she said, her voice so quiet that I almost didn't hear it. I was confused. I didn't know what I wanted. And when I met him, I thought maybe this was the answer. A year. She had been hiding this for a year. A year of lies. A year of betrayal. I felt the world closing in around me again, suffocating me with the weight of what she had just confessed. It was too much to process, too much to forgive. You should have told me, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You should have told me, instead of dragging this out, instead of hiding behind lies. I know, she replied, her voice breaking. I should have. I'm sorry. The words felt hollow now. Sorry. Apologies. They couldn't erase what had happened. They couldn't undo the damage that had been done. I felt like I was drowning in this never-ending cycle of regret, and there was no way out. I was silent for a long moment, my mind racing. I can't do this anymore, Tara, I said finally, my voice hoarse. I don't know who you are anymore. I don't know if I ever did. I understand, she said, her voice barely audible. I never meant for it to get this far. But I can't change what's happened, and neither can you. Her words hung in the air like a death sentence, and I realized that she was right. There was no going back from this. There was no fixing what was broken. I think it's over, Tara, I said, the finality of it sinking in. For both of us. And with that, I ended the call. I stood there, feeling like everything inside me had just been torn apart. The pieces of my life that I had been holding on to, my trust, my love, my hope, had all been shattered in the blink of an eye. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I could barely stand. And yet, despite the overwhelming pain, a part of me felt a strange sense of relief. The truth had finally been laid bare. No more lies. No more secrets. Tara was no longer the person I had believed her to be, and I was no longer the person who could accept it. But that didn't mean it was over. Not for me. I needed to move on. But first, I needed to face the one person who had caused it all, Luke. It's funny how life has a way of forcing you to face things you're not ready for. The pain, the anger, the sense of betrayal. It's all so consuming in the moment. But somehow, time has a way of dulling the sharpest edges, of giving you space to heal. The hardest part isn't the confrontation, the moments of intense emotion when everything falls apart. No, the hardest part is when you're left alone with yourself, trying to make sense of what comes next. After my last conversation with Tara, I thought I would never recover. I was sure that the rest of my life would be spent in the shadow of her lies, haunted by the person I had loved, who had hurt me so deeply. But as the days passed, something unexpected began to happen. The heaviness started to lift, slowly at first. I remember waking up one morning and realizing that the weight on my chest wasn't there anymore. I wasn't numb. I wasn't angry. I was just free. I had spent so long holding on to what I thought was my future with Tara that I had forgotten what it felt like to dream beyond that. I had forgotten who I was outside of that relationship. But now, I had the chance to find out. And that thought, just that simple realization, was like a spark in the darkness. It wasn't easy. There were days when the pain would hit me unexpectedly. Memories of Tara would flood my mind, and I'd find myself replaying the good moments, questioning what went wrong, wondering if I could have seen the signs earlier. But those moments didn't last as long. They didn't define me anymore. I started to rediscover the things I loved, the things that had gotten lost somewhere along the way. I took up photography again, something I had stopped doing years ago. I reconnected with friends I had neglected while I was consumed by my relationship. I went on walks, listened to music, did things that made me feel alive again. And then, one day, I met someone. Her name was Lily. I met her at a coffee shop on a Saturday afternoon. She was sitting by the window, reading a book, and for some reason, I felt drawn to her. We started talking about nothing in particular at first. Books, movies, the usual small talk. But there was something about her smile, the way she looked at me like she wasn't judging, like she didn't know about my past. She was just present, and in that moment, that was enough. We talked for hours. The conversation flowed easily, and for the first time in months, I found myself laughing and enjoying the moment. It wasn't about comparing her to Tara or trying to find something in her that had been lost in the past. It was just a connection, a real one. We started seeing each other more often. Dinner, walks, random outings. It was new and exciting, but what stood out the most was how easy it felt. There was no baggage, no heavy history between us. Just two people learning about each other, enjoying each other's company. Lily helped me rediscover what it felt like to be seen for who I really was. Not the man who had been hurt, not the man who had been betrayed, but the person I had forgotten I could be. A person who still had a future, who still had dreams, and who deserved love. And slowly, I realized that while the past had shaped me, it didn't define me. Tara's betrayal had been painful, but it had taught me something important, that I was capable of moving forward, that I could rebuild, and I could heal. I didn't need to stay stuck in the past. As I sat on a park bench one evening, Lily beside me, I realized that I was finally free. Free from the weight of past mistakes, free from the hurt that had held me hostage for so long. I wasn't defined by the person who had hurt me. I was defined by my ability to heal, to move forward, to embrace the future with hope. "Thank you," I said to Lily, the words slipping out before I even realized it. She turned to me, her smile warm and understanding. "For what?" "For showing me that I can be happy again," I said, my voice quiet but filled with gratitude. Lily simply took my hand in hers and squeezed it gently. "You never lost it, you know. You just had to find it again." I looked out at the horizon, the sky fading into dusk, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. The storm had passed. The hurt was still there, lingering, but it was no longer the loudest voice in my mind. The future was wide open, and I was ready to embrace it.